She threw the Korean Mafia boss's enforcer out of her dojo's front door. And miles away, he watched the security footage 3 times with his thumb pressed to the frozen frame, because that throw, that exact follow-through, belonged to only one person in the world. The 16-year-old girl who'd put him flat on his back at a tournament 10 years ago and then reached down to help him up instead of mocking him. He'd spent a decade and the full weight of his criminal empire quietly searching for her. And she had no idea that the man who now legally owned her mortgage, who showed up at her door in a bespoke suit offering to erase her debt in exchange for private judo lessons 3 nights a week, was the same boy she'd beaten, corrected, and forgotten before Monday. But what happens when she finally figures it out and has to decide whether the version of him she built on the mat is worth fighting for against the version the rest of the city is terrified of? If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now because this channel is built for stories exactly like this one. Love that makes no logical sense until suddenly it's the only thing that does. Stories about people who find each other across impossible distances, impossible differences, and a full decade of silence. You are going to want to stay for every second of this. Now let's go back to where it all began. 10 years ago, mid-July, a regional judo invitational at a community sports center in a neighborhood that smelled like cut grass and funnel cake from the summer festival 2 blocks over. Chiamaka Ose was 16 years old, 5'7", already dressed out and doing grip drills on the edge of the mat while everyone else stretched and socialized. She didn't socialize before competition. Never had. Her father, Coach Emeka Ose, the man who'd built the Southside Judo Academy out of donated mats and borrowed time, had taught her that competition was a conversation between 2 bodies. Everything before it was noise. She was watching the bracket board when they walked in. 4 men in black, serious faces, moving in a tight formation around a boy who clearly did not want to be there. He was Korean, 17 or 18, built with the casual athleticism that money sometimes produces, jaw-locked with the kind of arrogance that gets constructed when someone spends their whole life being told that discomfort is something other people experience. He had a duffel bag on one shoulder and the expression of a person completing a punishment. Chiamaka went back to her grip drills. She didn't think about him again until the bracket posted his name directly across from hers. Baek Sung-ho, North Shore Elite Circuit. Entered by his handlers to broaden his experience. She noticed the 4 men take seats directly behind his corner. She noticed the way his eyes swept the room like he was counting exits. She filed it and focused. When they stepped onto the mat, he looked at her for the first time. Something moved across his face. Not quite disrespect, but the cousin of it. The automatic recalibration of someone who'd expected a completely different kind of challenge. She gave him nothing back, just bowed and took her stance, and then she waited for him to make his first mistake. He went for the dominant grip immediately, aggressive, trying to take control before she could think. She let him believe he had it. 3 seconds. She tracked his weight distribution, his preferred pivot leg, the slight overcommitment pushing out from his left shoulder. That was enough. She loaded her hip, dropped her center of gravity, and used every single pound of his aggression against him. The throw was clean. Textbook. Devastating. He hit the mat flat and hard, all the air leaving his body at once, staring straight up at the ceiling. The gym went very quiet. Chiamaka stood over him, breathing completely steady. She wasn't performing calm, she simply was calm. She looked down at him, and then she did something she absolutely did not have to do. She reached her hand down. He stared at it for a full beat, and she watched something shift behind his eyes. Not anger. Something more complicated. The look of someone who has just realized they've been wrong about something important. "Your back foot," she said quietly. Your weight was too far forward. Fix your stance, and you'll never be that exposed again." Then she gripped his hand and pulled him up. He said nothing, but he did not stop looking at her. She walked back to her corner. She won the tournament that afternoon. The boy with the 4 bodyguards watched her final match from the opposite bleachers, standing, arms folded, never once checking his phone. He watched her the entire time like he was memorizing something he intended to keep. She didn't learn his full name until the bracket sheet on the way out. She tucked it in her bag and forgot about it entirely by Monday morning. He never forgot a single second of it. Not for 10 years. Now, the present. And here is where things get complicated. Chiamaka Ose was 26, 6 weeks behind on the dojo's mortgage, and had exactly $43 in her personal checking account. None of this showed on her face. She was running a 7 a.m. fundamentals class for 8 kids aged 9 to 12, moving through foot sweep demonstrations with the precise economy of someone who had done this 10,000 times and still found real meaning in it. The gym smelled like old rubber mat, and the tea her assistant instructor Brielle always made too strong. Fluorescent lights buzzed above faded photographs of her father on the wall. Regional champion, 1998. National qualifier, 2001. Coach of the year, 4 times over. Emeka Ose had died 14 months ago. Cardiac arrest. Sudden, cruel, and completely without warning. The way the worst things always arrive. He had left behind a dojo, a neighborhood that depended on it, $1,200 in savings, and a mortgage that had been quietly underwater for years. He'd never told his daughter about the mortgage because he hadn't wanted her to worry. She found out when the first foreclosure notice arrived. Since then, Chiamaka had added physical therapy clients 6 mornings a week at a sports medicine clinic 15 minutes away, coached afternoon and evening classes at the dojo, skipped meals she didn't notice she was skipping, and refused every suggestion. From Brielle, from her Aunt Nana, from the pastor of her father's church, that she simply let the building go. The dojo was not a building. It was her father's handwriting on the wall. She was not letting it go. Then the intimidation crew arrived on a Thursday afternoon, and everything changed. 3 men. Corporate casual gone wrong. The kind of outfits that try to say we mean no harm, and achieve the complete opposite. They represented something called Gray Line Asset Management, a name Chiamaka had seen on mortgage transfer paperwork 6 weeks ago when the debt had been silently purchased from the bank without any announcement. They had a clipboard, a buyout offer on crisp paper, and the quiet confidence of people who believed that showing up in person always closed the deal. The biggest man stepped forward. Not toward her. Just into the room. A slow reminder of physics. Chiamaka tilted her head. She looked at him the way she looked at opponents who had made a fundamental error in their balance. Calm, almost curious. "You're right-footed," she said. "Weight's already loaded. You're thinking about grabbing my arm." He blinked. She moved. 4 seconds. She did not strike him. Did not hurt him. She simply redirected his momentum so efficiently that he was airborne before he understood what was happening. And then he was outside on the sidewalk through the propped front door, sitting on concrete with his jacket torn at the collar and absolutely no memory of the transition. His 2 colleagues stood frozen in the doorway. "The dojo," Chiamaka said from inside, completely composed, "is not for sale." She closed the door. She thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. Because miles away, in a penthouse that didn't appear on any real estate listing, a man named Sungho Bayek was about to watch that footage and feel something crack open in his chest for the first time in a decade. His director of operations, a sharp-faced man named Chulwoo, pulled up the security feed from the Southside property. The contact team failed the acquisition. The property manager physically removed the lead from the premises. "We have footage. Play it." He watched. didn't move, watched it again. Then he set his water glass down with the sound of a period at the end of a sentence. Show me the throw again. Chulwoo rewound it. Left collar grip, right lapel, body drop, hip load. And the follow-through. That specific follow-through. Nobody in the world finished a throw with that follow-through. Nobody except the girl who had taught it to him on a tournament mat 10 years ago. Sung-ho pressed 2 fingers to the frozen frame and said nothing for a very long time. Then, nobody touches that property. Nobody calls her. Nobody goes anywhere near that building. Chulwoo waited. I'll handle it personally. The silence that followed was the kind Chulwoo had learned to treat with exactly the same weight as a direct order. Here is what Chiamaka Osei did not know. She thought she was fighting a faceless corporation for her father's legacy. What she was actually doing, completely without realizing it, was landing herself in the direct path of the one person on Earth who had spent 10 years looking for her specifically. He came on a Monday evening. Chiamaka was re-rolling the edge mats when she heard the car outside. The particular silence of an engine that cost more than her mortgage. She straightened without looking, rushed. 2 men at the door. Not like the last ones. These moved differently. With a controlled economy she immediately recognized as something trained, something martial. They were flanking someone who clearly did not need flanking. He was tall. Lean in the way that reads as precision rather than thinness. Dark suit, no tie, collar open by exactly 1 button. A man who dressed for himself and not for any particular room. He looked at her, and something passed through his expression so quickly she almost missed it. Something that was not cold at all. Ms. Osei. His English was smooth, unaccented. She noted that he hadn't phrased it as a question. I represent the holding company that currently owns your mortgage note. She crossed her arms. Your last representatives left in a hurry. I heard. A movement at his mouth that wasn't quite a smile. I also watched the footage. He glanced at the 2 men with him. Wait outside. They looked at each other. Outside, he said, in a tone that ended discussions. They went. He looked at her again. May I come in? You can say what you need to say from the doorway. Something moved in his face. Not offense. Closer to respect. He reached into his jacket and produced a single document. A few pages, clean typeface, paper-clipped. He held it out. She didn't take it immediately. She looked at him first. His eyes were older than his face. Much older. She had seen that kind of age in eyes before. In her father's. Toward the end. In students who had come to the dojo not for sport, but because life had required them to learn how to fall and get back up. She took the document. Page 2, he said. A debt forgiveness agreement. The full outstanding balance of the mortgage, cleared. Title transferred free and clean to her name within 30 days of signing. She read it twice. What do you want for this? Private instruction, 3 sessions a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday evenings. Judo. Specifically, ground fundamentals and throwing mechanics. She looked up. A man who owns a mortgage note needs judo lessons. A man who has been off the mat for 10 years needs someone who knows how to teach. Plainly, like a fact. You know how to teach. She studied him. The document was real. The law firm letterhead was legitimate and expensive. She had done enough panicked late-night research on her financial situation to know the difference. Her father's photograph was watching her from the wall. She signed it. Tuesday, she said. 7 o'clock. You're late, we don't start. You argue with my corrections, we stop. You bring anyone else onto this mat without my permission, we're done. And the agreement holds regardless. Clear? He held her gaze. Clear. He took the signed document, folded it carefully, and tucked it inside his jacket. Then he did something she hadn't expected. He looked around the dojo, slowly, taking in the photographs, the worn mats, the faded championship banners, the hand-lettered sign above the mirror that read, "Fall 7 times, stand 8." And something in his face went very quiet, private, like a man looking at something that meant something to him personally and was not ready to explain why. She filed that. She filed everything. "Tuesday," he said and walked out. She thought she knew what she had agreed to. She had no idea. He came back Tuesday, exactly on time. Alone, which surprised her. Plain training clothes, nothing performative. She ran him through a full warm-up, watched his movement patterns, built her assessment. He'd had real training once. The muscle memory was still there under the rust. Good hip rotation, good balance recovery. What had suffered was his patience. He anticipated before he read. Someone had built speed into him at the expense of sensitivity. She could fix that. She asked him to show her his favorite throw. He set up on her and took his grip, and she felt it immediately. The pressure. Iron pattern in his hands, the tell in his left elbow. She let him execute. He went for the hip throw, technically correct, but carrying too much forward lean. She absorbed it, landed clean, was back on her feet before he'd completed the follow-through. She looked at him, let the silence sit. Then, "Your back foot." He went completely still. She walked around him, placed her hand on his rear shoulder, adjusted his angle by 15 degrees. "Your weight was too far forward. You're telegraphing the initiation 3 moves before you execute. Fix your stance, and you will never be that exposed again." She stepped back, met his eyes. He was staring at her with an expression she had never seen on a student before, like someone had spoken a password they hadn't expected to hear. He knew those exact words. He had been carrying them for 10 years, but she didn't know that yet, and he was not ready to tell her. Not yet. "Again," she said. He came back Thursday, Saturday, the following. Tuesday. Every single session, on time, alone, plain clothes, doing every drill without modification or pushback. He was a good student, not because he was naturally gifted, though he was, but because he listened without ego. On the mat, he followed her completely. The problem was the spaces between throws. Between drills, when they were resting and resetting, he would ask her questions about the dojo's history, about her father's teaching philosophy, about why she'd chosen physical therapy alongside coaching. And she found herself answering, not because she was careless, but because his questions were genuinely good, and he listened to her answers with the same complete attention he gave her corrections. Wholly, without interrupting. With the quality of focus that had become increasingly rare in the world. She told herself it was professional. She was not entirely sure she believed herself. Around week 3, she started noticing something strange happening outside. The men who had been hovering near the dojo block, low-level, territorial, the kind of ambient pressure the neighborhood had spent years navigating around, were gone. Then the corner 2 streets over that had been a consistent source of late-night trouble went completely quiet. Then Mrs. Adeyemi, who ran the alteration shop 4 doors down, mentioned that 3 men had shown up and returned her stolen delivery without any explanation. Then the convenience store on the corner had its broken front window replaced anonymously, overnight. The neighborhood was becoming, quietly and inexplicably, safer. She did not ask him about it directly. She watched him instead, on and off the mat, the way she watched opponents, building a picture, waiting for it to become complete. Week 4, a Thursday night. He made a mistake mid-drill, shoulder dropping, frame collapsing, and she called it sharply. And he laughed, not a polished social laugh, a short, unguarded sound of genuine acknowledgement, And for just 1 second, she saw the person underneath all the precision and the stillness and the weight of whatever it was he carried everywhere he went. Something warm moved through her chest. She turned away and called the next drill immediately. Week 5, he told her his given name. Not the surname, not a title, just Sung-ho. She used it the following session without thinking. He looked at her from across the mat when she said it. Neither of them acknowledged the shift, but both of them felt it. Week 6. Saturday. They were working ground technique, and she was holding his arm at the elbow to demonstrate a transition, her hand on his skin, close. When she said, "You're favoring the right side again." "I know." He turned his head. They were very close. "You've told me 4 times. I'll tell you 40 more if that's what it takes. That would require 40 more sessions. Then fix it faster." He held her gaze for a beat too long. Something in the room shifted pressure, like the air before a storm. She released his arm and stood up. She told herself it was nothing. It was clearly not nothing. If you need to know what happens when she finally discovers exactly who this man is, and what he says when she does, then you are in exactly the right place. Because this is the part of the story where everything changes. It was Brielle who found it. She had been quietly researching Greyline asset management on her own time, the way you investigate something you suspect your boss would tell you to stop investigating. What she found, handed to Chimaka on a Monday morning with a very steady hand, was a photograph. A society profile from 4 years ago. A feature on the philanthropic arm of a North Shore real estate group. Third from the left, Baek Seung-ho, listed as director. And beside the formal name, in the journalist's own copy, known in certain circles as Maui, the Hawk. Identified by law enforcement as a person of significant interest in connection with multiple shipping and protection operations across the city. Chimaka read it twice. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she put it in her desk drawer, went and taught her 4 o'clock class, and spent the rest of the evening sitting with the question she could not escape. The version of him she had built over 6 weeks on that mat. The man who came alone, who listened without ego, who laughed genuinely at his own mistakes, who was quietly making her neighborhood safer one anonymous act at a time. Was that real? Or had she imagined it? He arrived Thursday at 7. She was standing in the center of the mat, arms at her sides, waiting. "You already knew who I was?" he said. Not a question. He had felt the shift the moment he walked through the door. "Not when I signed. I know now." "And? What exactly did I agree to? Just the lessons? Or was I supposed to be grateful enough not to ask questions about the shell company that almost took my father's dojo? The offer was genuine. The debt forgiveness was genuine. I had nothing to do with the initial acquisition." He stopped. Something crossed his face. "That's not an excuse." "No," she said. "It isn't." Silence. "The neighborhood," she said. "That was you." He didn't deny it. "The corner, the deliveries, the window on Adiola's shop." "Yes." "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because it's your neighborhood." She felt those words land somewhere in the center of her chest and kept her face very still. Sung-ho. She said his name carefully, like she was placing something fragile. "Tell me what you actually want from this. No corporate language, no property documents. What do you want?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer at all. Then, "Do you remember a regional tournament? 10 years ago, July, a girl who told a boy to fix his stance and then reached down and offered her hand when she had already won and did not have to." The room stopped. She stared at him. Her mind reached back. A boy with bodyguards, 2 old eyes, arrogance already cracking before she had even moved. The look on his face when she pulled him off the mat. That was you, she said. Yes. You've been looking for me. For 10 years. Simply. Without performance. I never forgot what you said. The correction. The way you reached down. You had already won. You didn't have to do that. But you did anyway. His voice had changed, the professional distance entirely gone, and what was underneath it was raw in a way she hadn't expected from him. I built everything I have since that day. Every decision, every year, every choice. And the only thing I kept from before any of it was your face and what you said to me. I looked for you because I needed you to know that it changed something in me that I never forgot. That you were the only person who ever made getting back up feel like it was worth doing? Chiamaka stood very still. You should have said something, she said finally. Week 1, Session 1. I know. No excuses. I was afraid you would end the lessons. I might have. I know. She walked to the edge of the mat and back. He waited the way he had learned to wait in this room. Without pushing, without filling the silence. He had learned that from her too. What you do, she said. The life you run. That doesn't disappear because you're standing in my dojo being honest with me. No, it doesn't. I'm a physical therapist. I teach children how to fall, so they know they can get back up. That's what my father built here. What you do is the opposite of that. Yes, he said. It is. So what are we doing? What are we actually doing, Seung-ho? He took a slow breath. I don't know what I'm doing, except that every time I walk through that door I feel like a person instead of a function, and I have been a function for a very long time. She looked at that door, she said. It's not as a that door, she said. It's not as a client. We're done with that. Whatever this is, it is either something real or it is nothing. I am not interested in anything in between. He turned and looked at her from the doorway. The streetlight cut half his face into shadow. Saturday, he said. She didn't answer, but she did not tell him not to come. She thought she had time to decide. She was wrong about that too. Because trouble arrived the very next night, and it forced her hand in a way she had not planned for. Friday. She was locking up after a late session when 2 unfamiliar cars pulled up outside in a way that read immediately as intentional. The men who stepped out were not pretending to be anything other than what they were. One of them spoke to her in the practiced tone of a threat dressed as a conversation. They represented an organization with an interest in certain business arrangements, and they wanted her to deliver a message to a mutual acquaintance. Chiamaka understood immediately. Without consenting to it, she had become a pressure point. She called the number she had for Seung-ho. He answered before the second ring. He arrived in 11 minutes, 3 cars, 6 men. The exchange that followed in the street outside was quiet, fast, and left no visible mark on the block. She watched from the doorway. She watched the men who had threatened her leave. She watched the precise efficiency with which Seung-ho managed people who were afraid of him. She watched his face during all of it, controlled, cold, the face she had seen in the security footage that very first night. Not Seung-ho, the hawk. Something she had managed to forget about entirely across 6 weeks of Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday evenings. When his men were back in the cars, he came to her. Are you hurt? No. She looked at him. Is this what your life looks like? Most nights? No, but this is what it looks like when someone wants to find a lever. He held her gaze steady. I made you a target by coming here. I'm sorry. I was already a target before you came. I was losing the building. That's different. Is it? She was quiet for a moment. No one got hurt tonight. You handled it. I handled it the way I handle things. That's the problem you're pointing at. Yes, that is exactly the problem I'm pointing at. He stood there, hands at his sides. Made no argument. Didn't explain or justify or minimize. He simply stood inside the facts of himself and let her see them clearly. She felt something tear open quietly in her chest. Not anger. Something harder than anger and softer than it at exactly the same time. "Go home," she said. She spent the next 3 days away from the dojo. Brielle ran the classes. Chimaka worked her therapy clients and sat, with the weight of it all alone. And then her Aunt Nana showed up on day 2 with a pot of jollof rice and an opinion, the way Aunt Nana always did. "This man who cleared your debt," Nana said, sitting at the kitchen table with the direct authority of a woman who had raised 7 children and was not impressed by evasion. "Tell me about him." "There's nothing to tell." "Maka." Nana's voice went soft. "Your father's eyes are in your face right now." Chimaka was quiet. "You're afraid," Nana said. "Not of him. Of wanting something that doesn't look the way you thought wanting was supposed to look. His life is... I know what his life is. I also know what your face did when you said his name just now, when you thought I wasn't watching." Chimaka looked at her hands. "Your father built that dojo because he believed in people who were working to become something better," Nana said. "Not people who had already arrived somewhere perfect. People working. Is this man working?" She thought about the mat, the drills, the way he listened. The neighborhood going quiet. 11 minutes. "Yes," she said quietly. "He's working." Nana nodded, pushed the rice closer. "Then you already know what you think." Saturday arrived. She was at the dojo by 6:30, earlier than she needed to be. She rolled the mats, checked the lighting, made Brielle's terrible tea. She stood in front of her father's photograph for a while and had the kind of conversation she'd been having with him since he died, the kind that does not require words. She heard the door at 5 minutes to 7. He came alone, training clothes, no performance. He looked at her from across the mat and waited. "Come in," she said. He stepped onto the mat and bowed and took his stance. She walked toward him and stopped close enough that neither of them was pretending this was simply about training anymore. "My father had a saying," she said. "He said the mat is the most honest place on earth because you cannot fake balance. Whatever is actually true about you will show up the moment someone pushes." She held his gaze. "So I want to do this honestly. One match. No arrangement, no contract, no titles. Just you and me on the mat. And whatever is true between us either comes clear or it doesn't." He nodded. "Full contact," she added. "No holding back because you're worried about hurting me. That would be an insult." Something lit in his eyes. "I wasn't going to." She almost smiled. "Good. Grip up." What followed was the most honest conversation she had ever had with another person without using a single word. He was bigger, stronger, and had trained harder than he had let on. The rust genuinely gone now. 6 weeks of intensive correction having rebuilt what 10 years of absence had worn away. He moved with the focused intensity of a man who had something real to fight for, and she felt it in every grip and weight shift and recovery. He wasn't sparring, he was talking to her, pressing a question she could feel directly in her bones. She answered him the same way. She was faster, sharper. Years of daily practice against his months of return. She read him like a language she had been speaking since childhood. Every time he thought he had her, she was already 2 moves past it. And then she swept his foot. The same foot she had been correcting for 6 straight weeks, the same weight-forward error she had identified the very first session. And he went down flat on his back with the sound of a man who has lost something fair and completely clean. She came down with him, landed the pin, her knee against his hip, his wrists held, her chest heaving. The dojo was absolutely silent. Seungho Bayek, the man they called the Hawk, the most feared presence in 3 counties of organized operations, stared up at the ceiling. And then he began to laugh. Not the controlled, surface-level thing she might have expected. Something full, real, warm. A sound that lit up the whole room and belonged to a boy who had been thrown flat on a mat 10 years ago and had somehow, impossibly, found his way back to the same floor, the same woman, the same fundamental truth. She could put him on the ground and he would get back up wanting her more for it every single time. She loosened her grip. He did not move. "You did it again," he said, still laughing, the tension completely gone from his face. "Fixed your stance 700 times and you still load forward when you're feeling something. Apparently, that's when you have me." His eyes found hers, warm and completely unguarded. The hawk was gone. There was only Seung-ho. "You are the only person in the world who knows exactly where to find me." "You make it obvious," she said softly. "Every time." He looked up at her, unhurried, something in his face so open and so certain that her chest ached with the weight of it. "I don't want to be anything in this room except what I am when I'm here," he said. "I don't know if I can change everything overnight. I know I'm not finished working. But you are the only thing in 10 years that made me feel like the working mattered. Like there was something worth building toward." Her hands were still loosely on his wrists. "I'm going to need you to be honest with me," she said. "About everything. Not just the easy things. Yes. And I'm going to keep calling your technique when it's wrong. I would be insulted if you didn't. And this." She gestured at the space between them, the mat, the room, the whole impossible thing they had built across 6 weeks of Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday evenings. "This goes at my pace. Not yours." "Your pace," he said, without a single moment of hesitation. She looked at him one last moment. His hands, which she was still technically holding, turned upward. Not grabbing, just open. An offer. The same gesture she had made to him a decade ago on a tournament mat when she had already won. And reached down anyway. She took his hands. And then she leaned down and kissed him, with her father's photograph on the wall, and the smell of old rubber mats and Brielle's terrible tea in the air, and the whole city humming quietly outside. 2 worlds pressing their edges together and finding, against every reasonable probability, that they fit. He kissed her back like a man who had been counting the days to this exact moment for 10 years and was in absolutely no hurry to reach the end of it. When she finally sat up, his hands moved to her face. Careful, like someone handling something worth handling with care. "Your stance," she said against his mouth. "I know," he said, smiling the real smile, the one that had nothing in it but him. "I'm working on it." 3 months later, Chiamaka Ose walked into the Chicago Department of Business Affairs and submitted the Southside Judo Academy's application for expanded youth programming. The grant was co-sponsored by the newly established Beck Community Trust, a legitimate foundation, registered and clean, funded by the kind of quiet divestment that had cost more than money and taken longer than expected and had been worth every single day. Seung-ho was not there when she submitted it. He was in a meeting with his accountant and his lawyer and the third in a series of advisors helping him dismantle, piece by piece, the architecture of a life that had made him untouchable and completely alone. It was not fast. It was not clean, but it was happening. He texted her when it was done. "One more structure dissolved today. I smell like paperwork." She texted back, "Come to the dojo. I'll make you do drills until you forget what a corporate meeting feels like." He came. He always came. On a Tuesday evening in late spring, Chiamaka was running her 5 o'clock youth class when Seung-ho arrived and stood in the doorway watching the way he sometimes did. Early, quiet, present. She had told him once it was distracting. He had told her he would try to be less visibly present. He had not succeeded, and they both knew he wasn't actually trying. After the kids filed out, several of them by now greeting him with the easy comfort of people who had simply absorbed him into the furniture of their world, she faced him across the empty mat. "You're on time," she said. "I'm always on time." "You're annoyingly always on time." "You wrote it in the agreement. I took it seriously." "The agreement is expired." "I'm aware." He caught her hand when she reached him, unhurried. "I show up on time now for different reasons." She let him pull her in. Outside, the South Side neighborhood moved through its evening, Mrs. Adeyemi closing the alteration shop, kids from the late class walking home in pairs, the corner full of the ordinary comfortable noise of a place that had found its footing again. Above the door of the South Side Judo Academy, the lights were on, warm and constant, the way they had been when her father was alive. The way they would stay, she had decided, for as long as she had anything at all to say about it. Inside, Seung-ho Baek was on one knee on the mat, not because she had thrown him, though she could, and he knew it, and they both found this entirely appropriate, but because her belt had come loose during the last drill and he was tying it back with the same focused attention he brought to everything she asked of him. She looked down at his hands, steady and careful, and felt the full weight of what a decade of searching looked like when it finally came to rest somewhere worth resting. He looked up. She pulled him to his feet. "Fix your stance," she said softly. He smiled, the real one, the one with nothing in it except him, squared his shoulders, and stood exactly right. And if you want to know what happens when a man like that meets a woman like her in a different setting, in a world where judo becomes something else entirely, where the mat is replaced by something more dangerous, and the stakes are something neither of them expected, that story is coming. There are more of these, more people who find each other across distances that should have made it impossible. More love that builds itself out of correction and patience, and the willingness to reach down when you have already won. If this story stayed with you, if you found yourself rooting for them, if Chiamaka's calm or Seung-ho's laugh got you somewhere real, please hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss a single one. Check out the other videos on this channel. Your next story is already there waiting for you, and drop a comment telling me the moment that got you. The first throw, the 11 minutes, the laugh on the mat, the stance. I read every single one. I will see you in the next story.